There is a version of the British royal family that the world sees: the coordinated appearances, the careful smiles, the studied wave from a palace balcony. And then there is the version that exists behind closed doors, in the long corridors of Sandringham, and the quieter rooms of Windsor, where old loyalties run deep and old wounds run even deeper. It is in that second version where the most consequential moments actually happen. And it is there, according to multiple sources familiar with the palace's inner workings, that something has shifted between two of the monarchy's most formidable women, a shift that no official statement will acknowledge and no formal occasion will reveal, but one that those paying close attention say they can already feel. Princess Anne and Camilla, Queen Consort, have always occupied an uneasy space in relation to each other. On the surface, their interactions have been correct, even cordial, but correctness is not warmth, and cordiality is not trust. And in the past year, as King Charles III has battled a serious illness that has kept him from full public duties and left the institution more vulnerable than it has been in decades, the question of who holds what power inside the palace and how that power is being used, and by whom, has become more pressing than it has been in a very long time. What royal observers and journalists close to the palace have begun to describe is not a sudden eruption, but the culmination of years of quietly mounting tension. The trigger, according to people familiar with the situation, appears to be a piece of private correspondence, a letter, or a communication bearing the same weight as one, that allegedly revealed decisions being made and positions being taken without the full knowledge of those who should have been consulted. The specifics of what that correspondence contained have not been made public, but the reaction it is said to have produced in the woman who has spent her entire life defending the institution her mother built appears to have been unmistakable. To understand why any of this matters, you have to understand who Princess Anne actually is. Not the title, not the official biography, but the person who shows up behind the title every single day without being asked twice. She is 73 years old. She has completed more official royal engagements than any other member of the working family for the better part of 2 decades running. A record that is not ceremonial, but genuinely earned, engagement by engagement, year by year, in the kind of unglamorous duty that rarely generates front-page coverage but keeps the institution functioning. She does not complain publicly. She has never given an intimate interview in the way that so many other members of the family have. She has not written a memoir, accepted a podcast invitation, appeared in a documentary to explain herself, or used her access to court public sympathy. What she does, year after year, is show up. She flies economy class when she can. She keeps her staff lean. She carries out her duties with a kind of unsentimental efficiency that would have impressed her mother enormously. And she has always seemed to understand that the approval of the institution itself matters more than the approval of any audience watching it from outside. Queen Elizabeth II trusted Anne in a way that was visible without ever needing to be stated. When there were difficult things to organize, difficult conversations to manage, or family matters that required someone with both spine and discretion, Anne was frequently the person Elizabeth turned to. That role was not ceremonial. It was functional. It was the role of someone who understood, at a level most people never reach, what the monarchy actually costs, not in money, but in the constant, daily sacrifice of private feeling to public duty. Anne paid that cost without complaint. She still pays it, and she watches closely to see who else is paying it and who is not. When Charles became king in September 2022, following their mother's death at Balmoral, the shape of the institution shifted in ways both visible and invisible. Charles had waited longer than any monarch in British history for the throne, and he arrived at it carrying the full complexity of his personal story. His first marriage, its collapse, the years of public conflict, the relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles that had caused such lasting damage to the palace's public image, and finally, the slow rehabilitation of that relationship over the course of 2 patient decades. By the time Camilla stood beside him at the coronation in May 2023, the official story of the institution had absorbed all of it. She was Queen Consort. The late Queen had given her blessing to that title. It was settled, but settled officially is not the same as settled personally. And for Anne, who had watched her brother's marriage to Diana unfold from the inside, who had seen what the press could do to a royal woman, and what the palace could do in response, and who has always measured people by their consistency and their willingness to carry their full share of the weight, for Anne, the question of Camilla has never been entirely simple. It is worth stating clearly what is not being claimed here. There is no verified account of a direct, dramatic confrontation in the way that popular imagination tends to picture such things. Not a shouting match in a drawing room, not a formal ultimatum delivered across a mahogany table. What royal journalists and sources close to the family have described is something far more characteristic of the way this particular family actually operates. Not raised voices, but a shift in posture, a deliberate withdrawal of warmth. A set of interactions that those present found notable precisely because of what was not said as much as what was. The private correspondence at the center of this situation, what it contained, who sent it, and who received it, has been described in general terms by people with knowledge of the palace's internal dynamics without those specifics being confirmed in full detail. What appears to have emerged from it or around it is a sense that certain decisions involving the institution's direction and certain communications with figures outside the immediate family circle had taken place in a way that bypassed the input of people who felt they had a right to be consulted. In a family where protocol is not merely tradition, but a form of mutual respect between people who have sacrificed a great deal to maintain the institution together, that kind of bypass is not a small thing. It is not a procedural inconvenience. It is a signal. And in this family, signals are read with extraordinary precision. Anne has spent her life operating according to a clear internal code. She does not need the limelight. She does not want the credit. She is not, by temperament or inclination, someone who requires others to acknowledge what she contributes. But she does expect a certain standard of conduct from the people around her, and she is not known for softening her position when she believes that standard has not been met. People who have worked with her describe someone who gives her loyalty completely and whose disappointment, when it comes, is equally complete. She does not perform disapproval. She simply becomes less available. The warmth recedes. The courtesy remains, because it always remains with her. She's too disciplined for anything else. But the quality of the attention she gives changes, and people who are paying attention can feel the difference immediately. According to royal observers who have covered this institution for decades, what has been noticed in recent months is precisely that kind of change in the dynamic between Anne and Camilla. The gestures that were always professional now carry a quality of deliberate distance. The occasions where their paths cross, which in the nature of their shared roles and shared duties are numerous, are navigated with a precision that reads more like careful management than natural ease. Whether that reads as strain to a casual observer or simply as the usual royal composure depends on who is watching. But those who know Anne and know what her warmth looks like when it is genuinely extended say the difference is legible. Camilla herself is not an uncomplicated figure, and this deserves to be said clearly. The temptation, when writing about any conflict involving the Queen Consort, is to collapse her back into the role she played in the 1990s public narrative. The other woman, the villain of one of the most covered marriages in modern history. That was a long time ago. The world has moved. And whatever private judgments different people carry about what happened in those years, the public reality of recent decades is that Camilla has served in her role with a degree of competence and commitment that even her critics acknowledge. She has championed causes that require genuine investment. She has modernized her public presence in ways that required real effort over real time. She has, by most visible measures, tried to be the kind of consort the institution needed. But trying and succeeding are different things. And inside the palace, the judgment of whether she has succeeded is made by people who knew the institution before she was part of it. People like Anne, who carry not just the institutional memory of what the family has been through, but the personal memory of what it cost, and who evaluate the present against that longer, harder history. The illness that has shadowed King Charles since early 2024 introduced a new and acute layer of pressure onto an already complex system. The cancer diagnosis, confirmed publicly in February of that year, changed the atmosphere inside the palace in ways that will take time to fully understand. Charles has remained engaged with his duties to the extent his health allows, and there have been visible signs of recovery and of his determination to continue serving. But there have also been periods of reduced public activity, necessary withdrawals from the schedule, moments where the institution has had to function around the absence of its center. During those periods, the question of who is carrying the institution, and how, and with what transparency has been more live than it has been in a very long time. Royal experts and journalists covering the palace in the months following the diagnosis noted that the communication strategy around Charles's health was being handled with great care. The palace did not offer more information than it needed to. The framing of his appearances, the management of expectations, the decisions about what to confirm and what to leave unaddressed, all of it required deliberate choices, made by real people with real stakes in how those choices landed. And it is in the space of those decisions, who is consulted, who is informed, who learns things through proper channels, and who learns things secondhand, that the tension between Anne and Camilla appears to have sharpened most significantly. Sources describe to royal journalists a period in which Anne, already carrying an enormous public load to help support her brother during his treatment, became aware of developments within the palace's internal workings that she had not been informed of in advance. The nature of those developments has been discussed in general terms, without specific details being confirmed. What those sources convey is not a single dramatic incident so much as a pattern, a sense, building over weeks and months, that the institution Anne has given her life to was being navigated in ways that did not align with the standards she considers fundamental. Not a betrayal in the headline sense, but something quieter and perhaps more troubling. A sense of being kept at the margins of something she had every right to be central to. The specific mention of a private letter, correspondence that allegedly revealed something arranged behind Charles's back is the detail that has circulated most persistently among those close to the story. Private correspondence within the royal family is not unusual. Letters and formal communications have long been part of how this institution manages its internal relationships. When such correspondence becomes the focal point of a disagreement, it is usually because of what it reveals about the intentions of the person who sent it, or the arrangements it documents that were made without full transparency. The precise content of any such communication has not been confirmed. What appears to have been the case, based on what has been described by people with knowledge of the situation, is that the correspondence touched on matters of genuine significance to the family's internal management, and that its existence was not known to everyone who, by the logic of the institution's own internal relationships, might have expected to be aware of it. For Anne, discovering that something had been done or arranged in a way that circumvented the knowledge of her brother, the king, her brother, would not have been a matter of procedural annoyance. Charles and Anne have a relationship that is one of the genuinely close ones within this family. They have operated differently throughout their lives, chosen different styles, and have not always agreed on everything. But the bond between them is real and durable. And for Anne, her brother's dignity and her brother's authority are things she guards with the same intensity she brings to everything she considers worth protecting. The idea that someone within the household, someone whose position exists because of Charles, because of the institution he now heads, and what he has sacrificed and given to it, might have acted in ways that bypassed his awareness or diminished his authority at a moment when he was already managing the most serious health challenge of his life. To Anne, that would not be abstract. It would not be a matter of royal politics at a comfortable remove. It would be something personal, something that changes the quality of a relationship, perhaps for a long time. What this moment reveals most clearly, underneath the specific tension between these two women, is the particular weight that falls on Anne right now, and has been falling on her for longer than most people realize. She is simultaneously one of the hardest working members of the working family, a devoted protector of the institution her mother built, a sister watching her brother face something genuinely frightening, and a woman who has spent 50 years doing what was asked of her without seeking recognition or relief. She is carrying a great deal. And the question of whether the people around her are carrying their share, honestly, transparently, and with the kind of integrity the institution demands, is not a philosophical question for her. It is immediate, it is personal, it is the thing she gets out of bed to defend. Camilla, for her part, is also in a position of real complexity. She is queen consort to a king who is managing a health challenge in real time, in full public view, while the monarchy and the country and the world pay attention to every visible detail. The pressures on her are not small or simple, but the existence of those pressures does not, in Anne's world, grant anyone immunity from accountability. The institution has always demanded that the people who benefit from its structures also answer to its standards. That is the deal. It has always been the deal. No one who enters this family under any circumstances gets to claim the privileges without accepting the obligations. And the most fundamental obligation of all is honesty, particularly within the family itself. The broader story being told here, underneath the specific tension between these two women, touches something important about where the monarchy stands right now. Charles is on the throne, but managing illness. William is preparing to eventually inherit an institution that is meaningfully different from the one his grandmother led. The public's relationship with the royal family is more complicated than it has been in many years, shaped by Harry and Meghan's departure, by ongoing debates about the monarchy's relevance and its cost, by the shifting expectations of what a royal family in the 21st century is actually supposed to provide to the country it represents. In the middle of all of that instability, the people inside the institution are still people. They have loyalties and grievances and standards and histories with each other that go back decades. Anne and Camilla did not choose each other. They were brought into proximity by the choices of a man they both love, in different ways and with different histories, and they have been navigating that proximity within the constraints of an institution that has never been designed for ease or simplicity. What the private correspondence revealed, and what Anne's response to it has been, will likely never be fully known to the public. The royal family does not hold press conferences about its internal disagreements. It does not issue statements clarifying the state of relationships between its members. It absorbs its conflicts and projects its institutional face to the world, as it has done through every crisis of the past century. But the people who observe this family closely, who have spent years learning to read what the silences mean, and what the body language conveys that the official words do not, believe something has genuinely changed between these two women. That the tension which has always been present has been sharpened by recent events into something more pointed, more settled, more difficult to simply smooth over. For the monarchy, the stakes of any internal fracture right now are higher than usual. Charles's illness has already tested the institution's ability to function and project stability simultaneously. Any visible sign of serious division within the working family would be a gift to those who argue that the monarchy is too fragile, too internally conflicted to serve the purpose it claims to serve. Anne understands this. It is part of why her disapproval, when it surfaces, is always expressed quietly. The institution matters more to her than the satisfaction of being visibly right. It has always mattered more. That is the choice she made a long time ago, and she has never wavered from it. That restraint, that willingness to absorb difficulty and continue functioning without demanding acknowledgement, is perhaps the truest measure of what Anne has always been to this institution. Not the star of the story, not the one whose name anchors the biggest headlines or whose image sells the most magazine covers, but the one who, when things get genuinely hard, is still at her post, still doing the work, still holding the line that everyone around her depends on, whether they say so or not. Whatever happened between these two women, whatever that private correspondence contained, whatever the shape of the reckoning that followed, it will be processed in the way that everything in this family is processed, behind closed doors, without public acknowledgement, in the language of silences and withdrawn warmth and the kind of very careful distance that passes to outside eyes for perfect composure. That is the royal way. It has always been the royal way. And Anne, more than perhaps any other person still walking those long palace corridors, understands exactly what that costs, and carries the cost anyway, every day, because she believes the institution is worth it. The question that lingers now is whether the people around her believe the same thing, whether they carry that cost with the same honesty, whether they understand that the woman watching them, the one whose loyalty is total and whose standards are absolute, and whose silence, when it comes, is more eloquent than any word she could say out loud, is still watching, still measuring, and still, in the way that has defined her entire life, holding everyone to account. There is something worth pausing on here, something that does not get said often enough when the conversation turns to Anne and her place within the contemporary royal family. She is, by almost any honest measure, one of the most remarkable public servants this country has produced in the past half-century. Not because of her title, but in spite of what that title demands. The Princess Royal role in practice is not a glamorous one. It is a grind. It is agricultural shows and hospital wards and charity board meetings and trade visits to countries the cameras rarely follow. It is showing up in the rain to open something, flying to a place no one is watching, representing an institution that an increasing number of people are not sure they want, and doing it with the same level of focused attention that someone else might bring to the work they actually chose. Anne chose this work in the sense that she has never deviated from it, but she did not choose the life the way someone might choose a career. She was born into it, and the particular kind of service that life requires, the subordination of private feeling to public function, the willingness to be seen without being truly known, the acceptance that your most difficult moments will be managed quietly, while other people's most difficult moments are analyzed in newspapers, is not something that can be understood from outside. It has to be lived to be comprehended. Those who have gotten close enough to understand Anne describe someone who is fiercely protective of the few things in her life that belong to her alone. Her horses, her farm at Gatcombe Park, the particular relationships built over decades with people who know how to be in her company without making demands of her. The inner circle is small by design. Entry is not easy. And once trust is broken in that circle, it is not easily rebuilt, not because she's unforgiving in a cold sense, but because trust to her is not a feeling. It is a fact or it is not. It cannot be partially restored. It is either present or it is not. This is the context in which her response to what appears to have been revealed through that private correspondence must be understood. Not as drama, not as a palace soap opera playing out for public entertainment, but as the reaction of a woman whose life has been built on certain non-negotiable foundations, encountering evidence that one of those foundations has been quietly undermined. The reaction was not explosive, because Anne does not do explosive. The reaction was a withdrawal, a recalibration, a shift in the quality of her presence in shared spaces that those who know her can read as clearly as a spoken sentence. Royal correspondents who have covered the family across multiple decades note that moments like this one, moments of internal recalibration that never surface in official communications, are often the ones that end up mattering most in the long run. The visible crises, the public statements, the official inquiries, those play out and are processed and are eventually filed into history. But the quiet shifts, the changes in who trusts whom, and who has been relegated to a different category of relationship, those changes tend to persist. They shape the texture of events for years. The relationship between women in the royal family has always been a subject of intense interest and limited understanding. The institution was designed by men for men, and the roles it assigns to women, even now, even after decades of change, carry the weight of that design. The queen consort is a role defined almost entirely by its relationship to the monarch, which means that its power, such as it is, flows through proximity to the king rather than from any independent authority, and, by contrast, has built her standing through demonstrated usefulness over time, through showing up, through the weight of her record, through the institutional credibility that only comes from decades of unbroken service. These are two very different kinds of standing, and they produce two very different relationships to the institution and to the people inside it. Camilla's position depends, in a fundamental way, on the king. Anne's position would persist regardless of whoever sat on the throne, because it is grounded in what she has done, rather than in who she is married to. That asymmetry has always been quietly present in the air between them. It does not need to be spoken. It is simply there, a structural fact of their respective situations. When something happens that appears to use the access and proximity that Camilla's position provides in ways that were not transparent to those outside that proximity, the asymmetry becomes something more charged. Because the question it raises, whether the trust that access is built on has been honored, is precisely the question that cuts deepest in a family where trust and institutional loyalty are the most fundamental currencies of all. The weeks and months ahead will tell their own story, as they always do with this family. Public appearances will continue. Engagements will be kept. The choreography of unity will be performed with the practiced ease of people who have been doing it their entire lives. Observers will read the body language at public events, how close they stand, whether eye contact is held, who reaches for whom in the small, unrehearsed moments, and will draw their own conclusions. The palace will say nothing officially because the palace never says anything officially about these things. But behind the choreography, in the moments between the public and the private, something has changed. Something was found out, or revealed, or confirmed that could not be unconfirmed. And Anne, who has given everything to this institution without once asking for the world to know how much she has given, is navigating what that means for her and for the relationships she holds closest. That is the story, not a fairy tale with a villain, not a palace thriller with a tidy resolution. A human story about the price of institutional loyalty, about the weight that comes with knowing too much and saying too little, about what happens when the people who carry the most are the last ones to be protected by those who should know better. Anne will keep going. She always does. The schedule will be met, the duty will be done, the institution will continue to move forward on her shoulders and everyone else's. But the question of whether those around her are worthy of what she gives, whether they understand, truly understand, what her trust costs and what its withdrawal means, that question now sits in the room between her and Camilla in a way it did not before. And in a family where nothing important is ever said out loud, that may be the loudest thing of all.